There comes a moment in your evolution when you realize that value cannot be begged for, it must be embodied. You cannot convince the world to see your worth if you have not first become convinced of it yourself. The eyes that overlook you are often blind to themselves, and so your task is not to be seen, it is to become visible by the light of your own self-awareness. Key 1. Withdraw your energy from the unworthy when you continue to give to what does not reciprocate. You teach the world how to forget you. Your silence, your absence, your withdrawal, these are not punishments, they are lessons. They say, I am no longer available for connections that require me to abandon myself. When you walk away from what drains you, you do not lose. It is the world that loses access to your essence. Self-worth must be embodied, not explained. This is one of the hardest truths to live, because the ego constantly hungers for recognition, for affirmation, for proof that it matters. Yet the deeper self, the soul, requires none of that, it simply is. When you have not yet realized your own inner worth, you try to perform it. You explain, you justify, you plead to be understood. You present your value like an item on display, hoping that someone will finally look at it and say, yes, this is enough. But value never flows from external validation. It emanates from internal conviction. The moment you begin to grasp this, the endless pursuit of being chosen begins to dissolve. You realize that visibility is not the same as significance, and attention is not the same as respect. Most people live their lives trying to prove something to the world that only they can confirm within themselves. They think if I just work harder, love deeper, look better, achieve more, they'll finally see. Yet this mindset subtly declares, I do not believe in my own worth until someone else confirms it. It is the tragedy of self-betrayal disguised as ambition. When you live like this, your energy becomes needy, and others sense it. You start to attract those who feed off your insecurity, those who sense that you are willing to earn what should already be yours by nature. You trade your authenticity for acceptance and call it connection, but no real bond can form when one party is performing for permission to exist. Embodiment begins when you turn inward, when you stop searching for mirrors in other people's eyes. To embody your worth means to become rooted in your being. It is to carry yourself as if nothing external can add or subtract from your essence. You no longer explain why you deserve respect. You simply live in a way that commands it. Your speech slows, your energy steadies, your movements become deliberate. People begin to feel that they cannot access you through flattery or guilt because you are no longer operating from lack. You are not proving. You are expressing. You become a force, not a request. There is a certain silence that comes with real self-worth. You stop trying to convince anyone of your intentions or justify your path. You understand that those meant to understand will do so without persuasion. The world may misread your confidence as arrogance, but that is the cost of walking in clarity. The humble are not those who shrink for the comfort of others. They are those who stand tall without needing to be taller than anyone else. When you no longer need to announce your value, you enter a higher frequency, where validation feels small and authenticity feels like home. This transformation is not born in comfort. It often begins after a season of rejection, after being overlooked by those you gave your best to. The pain of being unseen is not punishment, it is purification. It strips away the illusions that your worth depends on someone's recognition. Through that pain, you begin to build something sacred, inner certainty. You start to see that every time you chase validation, you lose alignment. Every time you silence your truth for approval, you shrink your soul. So you begin to reverse it. You start saying no where you once said yes out of fear. You stop explaining your decisions to those who never intended to understand. You begin to protect your energy like something priceless, and slowly the world begins to adjust. People feel the difference between someone who is performing confidence and someone who embodies it. The former talks loudly about boundaries, the latter simply has them. The former seeks control, the latter has inner command. When you reach this state, you notice that the same situations that once triggered you no longer hold power. The same people who once ignored you begin to seek your presence because your energy has shifted from chasing to choosing. This is not manipulation, it is magnetism born from wholeness. The more you embody your worth, the less you need the world to reflect it. Ironically, that is when it finally does. The mystery of true self-worth is that it cannot be performed. It can only be felt. It is a quiet strength, an invisible crown. When you know your value, you stop shouting for recognition because your existence itself becomes evidence. You realize that worth is not something to be granted. It is something to be remembered. And once remembered, it cannot be forgotten. The world begins to mirror the frequency of your certainty, not because you demanded it, but because you became it. Absence and silence are acts of power. It takes a deep kind of strength to withdraw from what no longer feeds your spirit, to withhold your energy when everything inside you wants to explain, defend, or fix what is broken. The instinct to overgive, to overtalk, to overstay, these come from the fear of being forgotten. Yet silence teaches you that your presence gains its value only when you're willing to be absent. Absence forces recognition. It shows others what your energy was truly worth when it is no longer available to them. It is the art of allowing space to reveal truth. Most people misunderstand withdrawal. They believe that to pull away is to surrender, to lose. But the reality is that stepping back from what drains you is an act of deep self-respect. When you continue to show up in places where your worth is dismissed, you are teaching others how to undervalue you. You become too accessible, too predictable, too available, and in the economy of human behavior, what is abundant is rarely cherished. The mind craves mystery, and the heart reveres rarity. When you withhold your energy, you remind others that connection is a privilege, not a right. Silence carries an energy that words can never hold. Words can be argued with, twisted, dismissed, but silence cannot. It creates space for others to feel the weight of their own actions. When you stop explaining yourself, you leave people alone with their conscience. The absence of your energy echoes louder than any speech could. It forces reflection. It shifts power back to you, because silence cannot be manipulated. It is clean, unarguable truth. And in that space, you grow. You begin to see who reaches out without being prompted, who misses you without being reminded, who notices the void where you once were. Silence also becomes the forge of transformation. When you retreat from noise, you return to yourself. You start to hear your own thoughts without interference. You begin to see how often your presence has been used as a cushion for others' indifference. Absence creates contrast. It allows you to measure who values you for your essence and who valued only your accessibility. It is a form of spiritual detox, cleansing the field of energy that has become crowded with people who take but rarely give. Every moment of silence is an act of reclaiming power from chaos. There is a unique elegance in restraint, the ability to remain still when provoked, to stay silent when you are misunderstood, to walk away when you are unappreciated. These are not weaknesses, they are signs of self-mastery. The person who cannot tolerate silence is still ruled by the fear of invisibility. But the one who can embrace absence understands that worth is not measured by constant visibility. A diamond does not shine because it screams to be seen. It shines because it exists in its natural brilliance, whether noticed or not. The world often teaches you to fight to be heard, to prove your point, to maintain presence. But the deeper wisdom of the psyche knows that true power does not chase acknowledgement. It attracts it. Absence is not the rejection of connection, it is the refinement of it. It filters the noise. Those who truly value you will feel the emptiness of your silence and return with clarity. Those who only consumed your energy will drift away. What remains is truth. To practice silence is to practice faith. Faith that what is meant for you will recognize you even in your absence. Faith that your energy does not need to beg to be valued. Faith that the quietness of your boundaries speaks louder than the chaos of your explanations. When you stand in silence, you are not avoiding confrontation, you are mastering energy. You are allowing the vibration of self-worth to speak in the most powerful language there is, absence. Absence refines relationships the way fire refines metal. It burns away pretense and leaves only what is real. The ones who reach out not because they miss what you gave, but because they miss who you are, those are your people. The rest fade naturally without effort, and you are left with peace, which is the truest form of luxury. To walk away without bitterness, to stay silent without resentment, to detach without fear, this is the quiet rebellion of the self-aware. It is not that you stop caring, it is that you stop bleeding where there is no healing. In time, others come to realize the gravity of what they lost when you withdrew. The voice they ignored becomes the silence they long for. The energy they took for granted becomes the absence that humbles them. You no longer need to teach them with words. Your absence becomes the lesson. The paradox is that in silence you speak the loudest, and in absence you become unforgettable. Emotional control is the signature of inner nobility. The true measure of power is not how much you can dominate others, but how completely you can command yourself. Most people believe strength lies in expression, saying what they feel, reacting when provoked, defending when attacked, but real strength is the opposite. It is the ability to remain still when chaos surrounds you, to remain clear when confusion tempts you, to remain kind when cruelty invites you to descend. The moment you master your emotions, you stop being manipulated by the world. You become a calm observer in a storm of impulses, a steady flame that cannot be blown out by the winds of circumstance. When you lack emotional discipline, every external event controls your inner state. Someone's silence becomes a threat. Someone's opinion becomes a wound. Someone's rejection becomes proof of your unworthiness. You become a puppet tied to invisible strings. One insult and you react, one praise and you rise. Your peace depends on forces you cannot control. Emotional reactivity is a form of slavery, and most people live their lives chained to it. To be free, you must learn to sit in the discomfort of your emotions without letting them dictate your choices. You must feel without becoming. Emotional control is not repression. It is refinement. It is not pretending not to feel. It is understanding that feeling is not the same as acting. The storm may rage inside you, but you do not have to become the storm. You can acknowledge anger without violence, sadness without collapse, love without attachment. This self-governance gives you dignity. It allows you to respond from wisdom rather than impulse. When you respond consciously, you no longer surrender your power to circumstances. You begin to influence reality from within. In relationships, emotional control separates the strong from the desperate. The one who can pause before reacting holds the power. When you do not immediately reply to provocation, you allow truth to reveal itself in silence. You stop feeding the emotional games others play. They expect chaos, and you offer calm. They expect argument, and you offer stillness. This unnerves those who rely on control through reaction. Your composure becomes your weapon, not of aggression, but of awareness. It shows that you are not seeking victory, you are seeking mastery. To be emotionally controlled is to be untouchable. It does not mean you are cold or detached, it means you are anchored. When others throw chaos your way, they expect to see you unravel. But when you remain centered, you mirror their own lack of discipline. People quickly learn they cannot manipulate those who have learned to master themselves. That kind of calmness is intimidating because it reflects truth back at them. It shows them who they are not yet strong enough to be. Emotional control is not a performance, it is evolution. It means you no longer let small minds pull you into small conflicts. There is a deep beauty in being unmoved by what used to disturb you. You begin to see that most of what once angered or hurt you was not personal, it was projection. People act out their wounds. They attack from insecurity, not truth. When you understand this, compassion replaces resentment. You stop taking things personally because you recognize that others are fighting battles you cannot see. Emotional discipline allows you to keep your heart open without letting it be trampled. It allows you to love wisely, not blindly. The path to emotional mastery is not glamorous. It requires patience, awareness, and humility. It demands that you pause before reacting, that you breathe before speaking, that you question your own narratives before believing them. It asks you to recognize when your ego is screaming for attention and to choose silence instead. It asks you to resist the comfort of drama and choose the clarity of stillness. With each act of control, you reclaim another piece of your soul from chaos. Eventually, peace stops being something you chase and becomes something you are. The more emotionally controlled you become, the less you need to prove. Your energy no longer spikes or crashes with external approval. You become stable, reliable, grounded. This stability radiates authority. It communicates that you are not at the mercy of the world. People begin to trust you because they sense that you cannot be shaken easily. In a society addicted to emotional outbursts, your calmness becomes a form of luxury. It is rare and therefore valuable. Emotional control is not the absence of feeling, it is the mastery of expression. It is the quiet confidence that allows you to walk away without anger, to speak truth without cruelty, to endure disappointment without bitterness. It is knowing that no external chaos can disturb the inner order you have built. When you reach this point, your energy changes. You stop being reactive and start being magnetic. You no longer chase peace. You emanate it. And that is the truest mark of inner nobility. Boundaries define value. Without them, everything precious within you leaks into places that cannot hold it. You cannot expect others to respect what you do not protect. People learn how to treat you by observing what you tolerate, and every time you allow disrespect to go unchecked, you unconsciously tell the world that your energy has no price. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates that filter intention. They exist so that your kindness is not exploited, your empathy is not drained, and your spirit is not trampled by those who mistake your openness for weakness. The human heart has a natural instinct to give, to connect, to share its warmth. But without structure, even the purest heart becomes exhausted. You cannot pour endlessly into others and still expect to remain full. The more you give without discernment, the more you lose your sense of identity. People who have no boundaries confuse generosity with self-abandonment. They call it love when, in truth, it is a plea for belonging. They overextend because they fear rejection, but in doing so, they reject themselves first. Real love, real self-respect, begins where you stop negotiating your worth for acceptance. To have boundaries means you are willing to disappoint others rather than betray yourself. It means you choose peace over people-pleasing. The world might call it arrogance, but it is actually alignment. The more aware you become of your energy, the more selective you must be about who has access to it. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability, not everyone can hold your truth, and not everyone is meant to walk beside you. Boundaries separate those who genuinely value your essence from those who only value your usefulness. When you start saying no, watch who stays. That is the test. Setting boundaries requires courage, because it means breaking the pattern of seeking validation through compliance. It means risking being misunderstood. But you must understand that your soul was not sent here to be endlessly available. You are not obligated to explain every no, to justify every distance, or to apologize for protecting your peace. Silence itself can be a boundary, a quiet declaration that not everyone has earned the right to hear your voice. When you begin living with boundaries, you start operating from choice rather than obligation. You stop being an option in someone else's world and start being the center of your own. The psychology of boundaries is simple yet profound. What is scarce is valued, and what is abundant is taken for granted. If your time, attention, and energy are given freely to all, they lose their perceived worth. But when you become selective, when you treat your presence as sacred, others begin to do the same. They step carefully. They speak with intention. They sense the gravity of your awareness. You no longer have to demand respect. It rises naturally from the space you create between yourself and others. Boundaries make your energy rare, and rarity commands reverence. Boundaries also serve as a mirror. They reveal not only who respects you, but also how much you respect yourself. Every boundary you fail to enforce is a reflection of an inner fear. The fear of being unloved, unwanted, or abandoned. But when you finally confront that fear and realize that solitude is not emptiness but clarity, your boundaries strengthen. You stop fearing loss, because you understand that anything that leaves when you protect your peace was never aligned with your soul in the first place. You begin to see that boundaries do not push love away, they purify it. People with no boundaries live in constant emotional debt. They overgive, then feel resentment. They say yes, then drown in exhaustion. They pretend to be fine, then wonder why they feel unseen. This cycle ends only when you decide that your well-being is not negotiable. The moment you declare that your energy is not public property, you shift your entire vibration. You no longer beg for reciprocity, you expect it. You no longer settle for attention, you demand respect. Your presence becomes a privilege, not a convenience. Boundaries are not about isolation, they are about elevation. They lift you from the chaos of emotional dependency into the serenity of self-possession. They allow you to love without losing yourself, to care without collapsing, to give without depletion. You stop chasing validation because your peace has become your highest currency. You move differently, speak differently, and attract differently. Those who are aligned with your frequency will honor your limits, not test them. Those who are not will fade away naturally without conflict. In the end, boundaries are the architecture of self-worth. They are invisible lines that declare, I know who I am and what I deserve. When you have them, you no longer need to convince anyone of your value. Your energy speaks for you. Boundaries create scarcity, and scarcity creates significance. You are no longer an option because you have defined the cost of access. And that price is respect. Pain transformed becomes power refined. Every human being carries invisible scars, yet few understand the sacred potential hidden within them. Pain, when resisted, becomes poison, but when embraced, it becomes medicine. The moments that once shattered you are not there to destroy you. They are meant to reveal who you truly are beneath all the illusions of control, pride, and ego. The fire that burns you can also forge you, but only if you stop running from it. You cannot transcend what you refuse to face. Every unhealed wound is a doorway to strength, waiting for you to walk through it with awareness instead of avoidance. Suffering exposes the truth about your attachments, what you cling to, what you fear losing, what you mistakenly believe defines your worth. Pain strips away the false layers of identity until only essence remains. It humbles the ego, softens the heart, and clarifies what truly matters. When everything you thought you needed collapses, you are left with yourself, and in that solitude, you discover something priceless, the ability to stand on your own energy. This is where refinement begins. You start to understand that resilience is not born from privilege, but from pressure. Every heartbreak, betrayal, and disappointment becomes an alchemical fire that transforms fragility into fortitude. Transformation through pain does not happen by default, it happens by choice. Some people experience suffering and become bitter, others become wise. The difference lies in perception. Those who resist their pain stay trapped in cycles of resentment, reliving their wounds through anger and blame. But those who sit with their suffering and ask, "What is this teaching me?" begin to reclaim their power. Pain, when examined with awareness, becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. It reveals where you have been giving away your energy, where you have built your worth around validation, and where you have mistaken comfort for growth. To transmute pain into power, you must first surrender the illusion of control. You cannot dictate how others treat you, how life unfolds, or how love evolves. What you can control is your interpretation. You can decide that the pain will not define you, but refine you. You can choose to let the wound open your heart rather than close it. Pain is not meant to harden you. It is meant to awaken compassion, both for yourself and others. Those who have suffered deeply often love more gently because they understand the weight of being misunderstood, the ache of being unseen. Their presence carries depth because they have lived through darkness and refused to let it consume them. There is beauty in brokenness when it is integrated. The cracks in your soul allow the light of consciousness to enter. Every experience of loss or failure becomes a lesson in humility, empathy, and courage. You begin to see that your pain was never random. It was the soul's way of sculpting you into something extraordinary. The most graceful people you will ever meet are those who have known suffering yet still choose kindness. They move differently, not because they have escaped pain, but because they have learned to carry it with elegance. Refinement through pain is a slow process. It asks you to stay present in moments where your instinct is to escape. It asks you to stop numbing your emotions through distractions and instead feel them fully without judgment. As you do, the energy trapped in those emotions begins to dissolve and clarity emerges. You start to recognize patterns, the same lessons repeating in different forms until you evolve beyond them. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once broke you now builds you. You no longer see your story as tragedy, but as initiation. When pain is transformed, it gives birth to purpose. The suffering you endured becomes a source of wisdom that others can draw strength from. You become a vessel of understanding, a mirror for those who are still lost in their wounds. Your words, your silence, your presence begin to carry a quiet authority that can only come from surviving your own darkness. This is the essence of refined power. It does not need to dominate or impress. It simply exists, steady and grounded. The world senses it. People are drawn to you not because of your perfection, but because of your authenticity. In time, you come to thank the pain that once broke you. You see that it was not an enemy but a sculptor, carving away the parts of you that were never real. It stripped you of pretense and taught you the language of depth. What remains is clarity, compassion, and calmness, the hallmarks of true strength. The refinement of the soul is not about avoiding suffering but mastering its meaning. Pain was the teacher that introduced you to yourself, and in knowing yourself, you discovered a power that cannot be taken, only earned. Choosing yourself makes you unforgettable. There comes a point in life where you realize that no amount of pleasing, proving, or persuading will ever make someone see your value if they are determined not to. It is in that moment that you face the sacred decision. Will you keep trying to be chosen, or will you finally choose yourself? To choose yourself does not mean to become selfish or detached. It means to finally recognize that your energy, your peace, and your purpose are not negotiable. It means you stop auditioning for roles in people's lives who wouldn't even remember your name if you stopped performing. Choosing yourself is the moment your life begins to align with truth instead of approval. For too long, many live as if love is a prize to be earned. They shrink, they mold, they silence their needs, believing that self-sacrifice will eventually buy them belonging. But belonging built on the abandonment of self is nothing more than dependency in disguise. When you live waiting to be chosen, you hand over your identity to those who may never appreciate it. You become a reflection of their preferences instead of an expression of your essence. Choosing yourself is how you reclaim that essence. It is a declaration that you no longer need to be discovered. You are already whole. This act of self-choosing is quiet but revolutionary. It is not accompanied by dramatic goodbyes or loud proclamations. It happens in small decisions. Saying no when your spirit is tired, stepping away from conversations that drain your light, refusing to justify your boundaries to those who mock them. It is in the courage to rest when you used to hustle for worth, to speak truth when you used to stay silent, to walk away when you used to chase. Every time you honor your own energy, you reinforce to the universe that you are not an option, you are the standard. When you choose yourself, something extraordinary happens, your energy changes. You begin to move with quiet confidence, no longer asking for permission to exist. You stop chasing validation because you finally understand that true recognition begins within. The people who once took your presence for granted will feel the shift. They will notice that your attention no longer bends so easily, that your affection is no longer unconditional, that your presence feels rarer. It is not because you became distant, it is because you became defined. You no longer crave to be wanted, you crave to be respected. Choosing yourself also means accepting solitude without fear. Many people cling to relationships, jobs, or identities, not out of love, but out of the terror of being alone. Yet solitude is not emptiness, it is the womb of transformation. When you stand alone long enough, you begin to see your reflection clearly. You hear your own voice without the noise of expectations. You learn what peace feels like without needing another to provide it. From that stillness, power emerges, the kind of power that makes you magnetic, not because you are trying to attract, but because you have become aligned. The irony of choosing yourself is that it often makes others choose you too, but this time for the right reasons. When your energy no longer leaks through insecurity, You attract people who resonate with your authenticity rather than your availability. You no longer beg for connection, you inspire it. You no longer explain your worth, it is felt in your presence. This is the paradox of self-respect. The more you honor your boundaries, the more others desire to be within them. The world begins to reflect the way you see yourself. There will always be those who interpret your self-choosing as arrogance, but that is only because your certainty exposes their uncertainty. People accustomed to your compliance will call your independence rebellion. Those who thrived on your self-doubt will resent your self-trust. But you must remain unmoved. You cannot build peace while apologizing for it. Choosing yourself is not a rejection of others. It is the foundation for authentic connection. When you love yourself first, you stop loving others from fear. You love them from abundance, not absence. You can give freely because you are no longer giving to earn. To choose yourself is to walk away from negotiations about your worth. It is to live as if your existence itself is a masterpiece, needing no justification, no permission, no validation. When you reach that level of self-awareness, people begin to feel it. You become the one they remember, the one whose silence spoke volumes, whose presence carried gravity, whose energy commanded respect. You become unforgettable not because you demanded attention, but because you embodied authenticity. The world does not remember those who try to fit in. It remembers those who are brave enough to stand alone. Choosing yourself is not the end of love. It is the beginning of real love. It is the realization that the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every connection you will ever experience. Once you understand that, you stop settling for fragments of affection. You no longer chase people who make you question your worth. You begin to live from the inside out, and everything that aligns with that truth finds its way to you naturally. To choose yourself is to become the frequency of respect, and that frequency cannot be forgotten.